Hello, and welcome to my YouTube channel. I am Jo Wilson, and I am reading a book that I have written. You can find me here each week. I try to post a new chapter, and the name of the book is Missionary Life with Billy and Jo Wilson. And it's all about our adventures that we had when we lived in Africa. And we've been retired for a few years, and so many things happened, and I just want to keep an account of it mainly so that my children and my grandchildren will one day read and hear what all that God has done. And so today we are beginning chapter 13. Finally, after a week or so in Bunia, we received word that a flight would be available for us to go to Isiro. Even though we didn't have our own place to live, and hardly any of our things had arrived yet from Nairobi, we were thrilled to be there. Nancy Clark and Nancy Valnes lived together in a nice big house that also contained a long building in the back that was equipped with a bathroom on one end. Each small room had a door leading outside. We decided we could stay in the room that was closest to the bathroom and store our boxes and barrels in the other rooms as they came in. It would have to do until we could find our own house. There was no electricity, but at least there was water for the plumbing. The girls allowed us to eat all our meals with them, and they were cooked on a wood-burning stove. We walked to and from church every Sunday, and then also we walked over town looking for a place to live. The girls had a vehicle, and we were able to use it occasionally, but on weekends they were always out of town a lot and preaching or teaching in one of our churches. It was very hot there, even at night. With no fan, it made sleeping very difficult. There was a very small window that we left open, but hardly any breeze. Billy would be wringing wet with sweat as he would lay down at night, so we would put a towel under him and I would fan him with a piece of cardboard. When he dried, we would remove the towel and both of us would sleep from exhaustion. By November, we found a house, but it needed much work, which included installing a bathroom and a kitchen. The house had belonged to one of our pastors that had been really comfortable living there without a bathroom and prepared all of their meals outside. We began first by painting every room. When we finished painting one of the rooms, we brought over the few boxes that had begun to arrive and stored them in the house. It made me want to open them, go through them all, and see what all we had brought and where we would put it. We found someone who would make our furniture for us, and he got started on it right away. We ordered a car that would be driven into Isiro and delivered to us. Things were finally coming together. Then one day, we received a letter from Jason's boarding school stating that he was having a rough time at school. His grades were bad, and he was not accomplishing his work. The principal felt that we really needed to come and just visit with him to see if we could encourage him in any way. With the work going on, getting our house ready to live in, Billy was unable to get away at that time, so it was decided that I would fly out alone. We contacted MAF, Mission Aviation Fellowship, and I made reservations to fly to Nairobi on the next day that MAF would be flying in to bring our mail. The morning that I was to fly out, we received a message on our high-frequency radio that MAF would not be flying as planned that day because of a civil war that had broken out overnight in the east side of the country. That was where MAF was located. This was early November 1996. We had been in Isiro only 2.5 months. Each day we listened to BBC on the radio. That's British Broadcasting System on the radio. That was our only way of hearing where the fighting was going on and how bad it was. So far, our area of the country was staying calm, but other areas were getting hard hit. Neither MAF nor any commercial airlines had been able to fly in or out of our area for 2 weeks. We were beginning to become very discouraged, wondering when it would all end. It was one of the hardest times we went through. Not being able to receive news from Jason and how he was doing, that was very hard. And no outside communication at all, except for BBC. We gathered each evening with the other missionaries and a few of our pastors to pray and ask the Lord to bring an end to this fighting and to keep our loved ones in His care. Then after 2 weeks, we received a message from MAF that things had calmed down in their area, and because we had not had any problems in our area, they would be flying in the next day to bring mail. They also asked if I was still needing to go to Nairobi. I told them that I did, and I would be out at the airport waiting on them and ready to go. The next day, as we drove up to the airport, the first thing we noticed was the large amount of soldiers just standing around. Because they all seemed very calm, we didn't think too much about it and felt that they were there only to guard. I kissed and hugged Billy goodbye and then got on the small 4-seater airplane, and I flew out with the soldiers all just standing there watching our every move. I was the only passenger on the plane, so when we got up in the air, I sent up a note to the pilot requesting that he bring me back to Isiro in just 1 week. I hated leaving Billy, and I hated flying alone, but it was something I felt that needed to be done, and I was just going to have to be brave. If I had known what the next 24 hours would be like, I would have been shaking in my boots. No, I would have never left Isiro without Billy. A couple of hours later, when we landed, I realized we were not in Bunia. Bunia was sort of the entry port city into and out of Zaire. Each time we flew, we had to stop there to register being in the country and to have your passport stamped with either entry or exit stamps. As the plane came to stand still, the pilot turned around and looked at me, and then he told me the reason that we were in a place called Nankundi instead of Bunia. While we were in flight, fighting had started up again, and he was unable to take me on in to Bunia and then on to Nairobi from there. And he didn't know when he could fly again. It just so happened I had been to Nankundi before, and I knew that there was a fairly decent guest house within walking distance of the small shed that was being used as an airport. So the only thing I could do was start walking. The pilot tried to reassure me that things would settle down again soon and I would not have to be there too many days. The manager of the guest house showed me to my room and told me a meal would be prepared for me that evening. I was thankful to have a place to sleep that night and food to eat, but I cannot tell you how afraid I felt. How long would I be there? How could I let Billy know what had happened? How could I let Jason know of my delay in coming? With all these questions going over and over in my mind, I fell to my knees beside my bed and I began to plead with God to intervene and get me safely out of there. I was still on my knees praying when someone knocked on my door. It was a lady I had never met, but she had just heard that I was there and needing to get on to Nairobi. She told me of a plane that she had heard would be coming in the morning, flying out. This was not a planned flight, but the pilot felt things were safe enough for him to take me first to Bunia and then on to Entebbe, Uganda. There would be another guest house there, and I could stay until maybe getting a commercial flight on into Nairobi. I felt this had to be the answer to my prayer, even though I was still very afraid of taking the flight and being in these places alone without Billy. As I tried to fall asleep that night, 1,000 thoughts ran through my mind. The questions started coming again. Does Billy know by now that the fighting had started again? Did he know that the pilot could not bring me back the next weekend? I wondered how Jason was doing and if he had heard about the war. I also wondered about Jenny and how she was able to continue the plans for her wedding without me or another woman's help. Before the mail stopped coming in to Isiro, I had received several letters from her asking me questions about the plans for her wedding and for addresses of people that we knew to invite. I did try to respond to all her letters, but during the month of November, the mail was very slow and unreliable. The next morning, the lady came back to my room and told me, go on down now to the shed, or the airport, and to just wait because she had no idea when the plane may come. There was a huge rock outside the shed that I sat down on, and I began my wait for the plane. As I waited, I prayed that God would protect me that day and help me to know what to do. It was a bright, warm, and sunshiny day, and my wait was not very long. Soon I heard the hum of a plane flying over. Once again, it was a small airplane, but for some reason, the passenger seats were not there, and in their place was a board that fit all the way across the plane from one side to the other. The pilot instructed me where to sit, and then there was another man that showed up, and the pilot told him to sit beside me on the board. The rest of the plane on the side of me and behind us was boxes and crates of what I don't know. Nothing very much was said by the pilot or anyone else as we took off down that grassy runway. We landed in Bunia and was there only long enough to get my passport stamped. I did have to pay the immigration officer about $75 that he said was for whatever was in my suitcase. He called it an exit fee. That was the first and the last time that I had ever heard of that. As we flew over Entebbe, Uganda, we were getting ready to land. The pilot instructed me when we landed to get off of the plane and go straight over to a small MAF plane sitting on the runway waiting for me. He would then fly me on into Nairobi. I was thrilled that I did not have to go into Entebbe and wait out the time in another guest house. Finally, I was on my way to Nairobi. The MAF people had let one of our missionaries know that I would be arriving soon and would be needing a place to stay until I could either go back to Isiro or perhaps Billy could come to me. I still had not been able to communicate with Billy, and I had no idea if things were still calm in Isiro, or was it only a matter of time before things blew up there. The 2 weeks that I waited in Nairobi were the longest of my life. I was able to travel to RVA, the boarding school, and visit Jason, but we were both so concerned about Billy that it made any other difficulties we were facing seem like nothing. Jason was thrilled to see me and to know that I was okay. He had spent the last few weeks not knowing how we were doing and if the fighting was going on in our area. Not being able to call or write made communication impossible. Even as I waited to hear something from Billy, that was torture. No one knew what was happening and if fighting had come to Isiro. As far as I knew, even MAF was unable to make any flights in or out of the country, and so we waited and we prayed.